children. You know, one thing about it, when I talk about us sometimes, I talk about how I believe that our family, and how I know that we are exactly where we're supposed to be at in this moment, as far as this podcast, this YouTube channel, and all this, because I know that you and I literally have had, you know, all different situations in terms of parenting. Mm-hmm. You know, when we got together, you had 2 daughters and I had a son.
Yep.
And your oldest daughter, I think when I met you, she was about 6 or so, but I hadn't met her yet. And your baby girl was 5. I believe it was somewhere up in there. She had just turned 5. So this was 97 when I met you. So 5 or 6.
We actually met in 96.
Okay.
96.
So 96. Yeah, 96.
96.
96. That's right. 96.
I think it was
so she was 5 or 6, and so, and that was the dynamic for a long time. You know, even when we moved in together, eventually it was just we moved when you came to Texas in 97. 97.
It was 97, correct.
You know, we only had Taz.
You just had Taz, yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah, in a house. And at that time, your both daughters was with their moms. Yep. You had one with your first wife and one with the ex-girlfriend, your oldest daughter with the ex-girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, it was just Taz for like...
And I think 3 years. 3 years it was just Taz. And then we had the incident, of course, with Quader passing away in a car accident, and that kind of put us in a threshold of bringing all the kids together at that time.
Yeah, but that's definitely fast forward. But leading up to that part, though, you know, that was 2002 when she transitioned, and we got married in 2000.
So it was almost 5 years, Taz.
It was yeah. So I mean, it was a lot that happened in that time frame before that happened. You know, you know, because we had. Do you remember? Was you there?
Was I there when?
Because you jumped right to 2002. Was you there them first 5 years? Because I'm like, I mean, there was a lot, because I remember it was, because we got to remember
when was I there?
Yeah, because when we first got together with regarding the children, we was in Texas, and your daughter lived in Dallas.
Right.
Her mom moved to Dallas.
Right.
And so that was a hoot.
What you mean a hoot? Why was that a hoot?
Mm-hmm. It was a hoot.
Well, go ahead. You can't just say it was a hoot and not explain why it's a hoot.
Well, it was a hoot. Don't you think so?
What the hell is a hoot?
Okay, so this is what happened. Okay. So if your youngest daughter lived in Dallas, okay, which was about 2 hours from where we lived at, okay, of course her mom was there with her.
Right.
Okay. And through the years, there were things that was questionable. Okay.
There we go. Once again, my character is in question all the time. Jesus Christ. Let's go.
But I couldn't say nothing. You know why I couldn't say nothing?
Why can you say something?
Because technically you was still her husband.
Lord,
so what could I say? Mm-hmm.
There was nothing questionable.
I mean, technically you were. You guys didn't get divorced until what, 99? Something like that?
98,
99. Around the same time me and my first husband got divorced.
So you was still...
The side chick. I was still the side chick. I was still the side chick.
No, technically, we both were side pieces.
We both were side pieces.
You were still married to your guy. So,
but see, here's the difference. I was still married to my guy, but he lived in a whole nother state. Your wife at the time was in Arkansas when we got back.
Yeah.
She decided to move on to Texas. She was like, you know what?
There was a lot of opportunity in Texas.
Go somewhere with that. Go somewhere. Go somewhere with that. Go somewhere with that. No. Okay, but I mean, it was no problem because, like I said, you was her husband. However, that led to us having to compromise a lot. So what did we have to do every weekend when it came to?
I had to drive up there and get Shanae, and that was a sacrifice worth it to me, because I wasn't to continue to have that relationship with Shanae at that point, or my daughter at that point, was important, because we did have a strong bond. And I think that's what African American fathers or black fathers in America get the bad rap for. Just because me and that woman is together, I will never ever stop being the father I need to be.
But no, nobody said that.
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah. No.
So
that was one of the reasons why I was very comfortable when you and I started to date. Let me just say this as a caveat.
Mm-hmm.
When you and I started to date and we started to get serious and then we became engaged and married and had kids, that was something that I looked at. If you was a dad, I wouldn't have never had a baby by you, let alone been with you. Right? Because I came from that.
Remember when I told you about Chaz when he was a little pup? And we were sitting there talking, and he was like, you know, I'm a package deal. This is what our conversation was. I'm a package deal. I got my son and stuff. And I had been hanging out with him a little while. And I said, hey, I won't have it no other way. Mm-hmm. Because if that was the case, I would want somebody to step in and treat my child the same way that I would treat, my kids, because he's my kid now.
And yeah, I remember that. But and I don't mean to cut you off. I remember that. Of course, and like I said, you didn't have a son at the time. You had 2 daughters, and so that was something that I really appreciated. You taking him and treating him like that. I mean, his father wasn't absent. He just didn't live in the same household as more in the same state.
Agreed.
And
he was, to me.
Yeah, but when it came to the kids, but that was a sacrifice we both had to make.
Yeah, man.
Which was, when you would go and get your daughter on the weekends, that was something, because sometimes you would have to drive all the way to Dallas, and then sometimes you guys would meet at the halfway point.
Yeah.
And this went on every weekend.
Yeah.
And so, looking back, that wasn't just a sacrifice you made by yourself. That was a sacrifice that the whole family had to make, because that took money, that took time, that took away from anything that. And so, it wasn't just like, I wasn't in it with you because I was. And then that went on for we got married in 2000, and then 2002 is when your oldest daughter's mom transitioned. Mm-hmm. But prior to that, she came to live with us when she was about 8 years old for a school year.
That was tough.
And that was, and so that was, and I remember when her mom transitioned, and she was in a car with her. It was a whole thing, not to get into that. That's not my business to tell, my story to tell. But a lot happened, and we started moving really, really fast. Life started happening really, really fast, because from her transitioning in April-May of 2002, I gave birth to baby Jerry in August of 2003. Mm-hmm. So May, June, July, August. So you're talking 15 months, because in those 15 months, and I say 15 months because from 2002 to 2003, 15 months, we went from just having Taz in the house to now having 4 kids in the house.
Yeah, that was a tough
because
transition.
As soon as the oldest girl's mom transitioned, of course, we got her. And then the other one's mom, who was in Dallas, I don't know, because at this point we were in Missouri. Were we in Missouri?
No, we were still in Texas.
We were still in Texas. Okay,
and,
we hadn't got to Missouri yet.
We were
moving to Missouri when all this started to occur.
Yeah. And at the time, it was just with my daughter in Dallas coming to us. It was almost like a bumper to help get through her situation, in my opinion. That's the way I looked at it, and because there was no way possible in my mind that I could have, or we could have dealt with that without that extra piece there, because she went through that transition where she really hated her life. We talked about this. You and I talked about this. She even went to the point to tell me, hey, why did God take my mom and not you? So as a father, and you looking at that, only thing I could do is say, hey, let's keep it pushing. I understand. That was the closest thing to her.
And so you feel like, and I mean, because I hear you saying that now, because I don't think we ever really talked about this, right? Yeah. Because I didn't see it that way. I didn't see it as you brought your second daughter in to be a comfort to your first daughter.
That's the way I looked at it.
Well, I looked at it as the mother felt like, well, you got this one, so you might as well take that one.
No.
That's how, because she was still getting the child support money.
It didn't matter about the child support money.
Well, it did if we had a household of 4. I know you didn't, but we had a household of 4 kids already at this. We had a household. We were both, at this point, 2 E6s in the military.
So,
and we had responsibilities. At this point, she had a whole new family with 2 more kids, and your daughter came to live with us. What I'm saying to you, what I'm saying and why I'm bringing this up is because looking back on all that, I don't think you really understood, because at that time that all this was going on, I was only a 29-year-old woman.
So
29, 30-year-old woman.
Who could understand that portion of it? You thrust into it like that.
No, that's not what I'm saying. It's the moving. What did I tell you? Because when we talk about the kids, for me, this is a subject that I think is out of all of it. And I think this is why I've avoided this for much long, because this is the part of me where it gets me, I think, emotional. Because
it's an emotional thing.
Why
it's emotionally charged.
This was the stake in the coffin, the nail in the coffin, is because of the kids, of why I decided to go ahead and go through with the divorce.
You can't. You really felt that way?
I felt because of what you said to me, Numa.
And I had a dream about this, that this was going to come up today. What I said to you,
Numa, we were already on like our last threads, and I don't know if we talked about this before, but you know, we were going through a lot. There was a lot that was going on, and so by the time 2007 rolled around, we were literally
okay. Let's not jump.
Okay,
forward.
so let's go back to 2002.
So
2002.
Let's go back to the time when we go from 1 to 4.
From 2002, we were just trying to juggle it, because at that point you got to remember. Oh yeah, by the way, I find out later on in 2002 that I'm pregnant with baby Jerry.
Yeah.
So at this point, so by this time we have it's you and I, it's the 2 girls, it's Taz, it's my mom, and it's George. And
I don't think George was with
because we all moved to Missouri at this point. We all had to go to Missouri, because at this point I went to Joe Star School, came back. We all had to now PCS to Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
So in route of me PCSing to Missouri, what happened? While we PCSing, I get pregnant.
Yeah.
I get pregnant with baby Jerry. Mm-hmm. So
Mm-hmm.
by the time I get on the trail, I don't know I'm pregnant until a couple months later.
December.
And so now, oh yeah, I'm pregnant. So that was December, January. I found out I'm pregnant, and so now but we still got trying to still balance life, because remember, all this had just took place less than a year prior, where we went from having 1 child in the house to now we're about to have a 4th child in the house, because it was the 2 girls and Taz, and now we're about to have a 4th child in the house because I'm pregnant with a baby, and so. And at the same time, we're still working, we're still serving, we're still trying to do all that we can in terms of trying to balance it all. Mm-hmm. Because there's no way to balance it. There's no one size fits all.
I think the thing, but you see, if the shoe was reversed and on the other foot, what would you have done differently? Because I think it's an emotionally charged situation, because at that point you were thrust into the situation to say, hey, I went just from having my son here to having 3 kids here. Then I went from 3 to 4 within 15 months. Within 15 months, we went from 1 kid to 4 kids.
And then 4 months after that child was born, what happened?
I deployed.
You deployed.
Yeah.
So never once did anybody check on me to see if I was suffering from any type of postpartum or anything. But you know what you did when you deployed?
Here we go again.
You know exactly what? No, because it's part of the story, Numa, and that's why when we talk about listen. Here's why I talk about it, because all I could think about was I remember me being so happy when I found out I was pregnant with a boy. Because if you remember, prior to that, we were pregnant with twins and we lost them.
Right.
And so right after we got married is when I got pregnant with, because we got pregnant with the twins right after, and then after that, a year or so later, we got pregnant with baby Jerry. Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, it was like, for me, that was a lot.
It was a tremendous amount. I'm not sitting there saying that it was not. And, and you stepped up and you did everything that you could do. Everything. When I say everything, you did everything. You make sure those kids had everything they needed. You make sure you was there. You make sure, and still living with, we just had baby Jerry. You know what I'm saying? We just had BJ. And, it was a blessing that they were not little pups. But, they were old enough to where you can give them guidance. Hey, you do this, you do that, blah, 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 check your homework, blah, blah, blah. And you did all that. You kept it in order. Nobody wants to belittle what you did or what, I think you go back to that so much. And I know you stepped in there. And this is what a lot of people need to understand. Sometimes you got to step up if you're going to be in that situation. I didn't, if it would have just been you, I, and Taz for the rest of it, and that's the way it could have been planned out, maybe it could have.
But I think that's one of the things that people don't realize when they do date people that have kids from situations, because it wasn't just that. I mean, I don't think people take that into consideration that anything can happen. Because I know people who date people with multiple kids, and they don't know what happened. That's why my thing to anybody is that, I'm like, when I had to become a mother of 4 in a very short time, I was barely 30. No one told me how to do that. And so I say that because I felt like there was a lot of the responsibility that was on me. And I had to uphold a certain standard because I was the woman. I'm the woman. I'm the wife. I'm the queen of the family, And so the reason why this story is impactful for me, because in my mind, the kids is what was keeping us together. And so if we could have got past those situations, right? But once we started to look at what was being done was nothing. To me, it changed the trajectory of our relationship.
What was being done to nothing? Come on now, you can't nothing. What are you talking
about? In other words, Newmys, when I think about like I said, for me, the kids, because I remember when Taz told me one time, and I always feel that people say things to me in my life where I may not understand the time, but then there was a time where I'm able to pull those things back. So I remember when Taz was 4 or 5 years old, before you and I got married when we were in Texas. And I told him, and you and I were going through some things at the time. And I was like, I don't think Jerry and I are going to be together anymore. And we weren't married yet, but we were just dating, we're living together. And so he said, well, and I said, well, no, Taz, go ahead and say what you're going to say. He was sitting in the front seat, and he says, well, I just feel like you need to make up your mind. And I said, make up my mind. He said, yeah, you with your, you say, you was with my daddy. You ain't with him no more. Now you with Jerry. You saying you ain't going to be with him no more. I feel like you just need to make up your mind who you want to be with. And so when he said that to me, fast forward, I remember when I was going through those things we were going through when we were at Fort Leonard Wood. Because after the baby was born was when things really started to get rocky. And when we first was talking about divorce, when we was like, you know what, this is it. And so I recall that conversation that Taz said to me. And, because you remember what was going on at Fort Leonard Wood, when I had to run around the post looking for so-and-so and all that.
How old was our son at that time?
He was a baby.
At that time?
Yeah, because remember, you deployed when he was 4 months old. Then you came back. So by that time, we're talking 2004, right? Because February, March, April, May, because you came back like June or so of June, July of 2004. So I left off the trail September of 2006, because that's when I went to OCS. So at that point, you're figuring he's no more than 2 years old in this time frame then. You know what I mean? About 2 years old in this time frame. And so things were moving fast in those 2 years.
A lot of stuff is moving fast in that time frame. But what it goes back to is you and I saying to each other, that was a bunch of stuff that was happening.
Right.
And we can't sit there and say, because I know doing all these talks, I kind of look like the heel. I kind of look like the bad guy. Because everything, you was this, you was that, oh, Jesus. But no. You had some play in that,
I had a whole bunch of play in it.
You had a whole bunch of play in it.
I had a whole bunch of play in it. And I don't ever want to, through this process, make you look like that. Because it takes two for everything.
Well, it's already been formed.
When I'm telling you what happened, it ain't like I'm lying, though. It ain't like I'm lying. I'm talking about what really happened. I'm sorry my memory is better than yours.
No.
But I'm telling you exactly, because you're co-signing it because you remember the things that happened. And I tell a better story than you. That's all it boils down to. I'm able to tell the story and connect the dots. But what I will say is this, and I mean this, and I mean this on everything. And I tell you this all the time. You are a great husband, a great man, a great father. You understand what I'm saying? When we were married, 20, 30 years of age, we were doing the best we can with what we had. And I wouldn't trade those years for the world, right? Because I knew that you taught my son that I had, Taz, your stepson, your bonus son, and then our son, Jerry, what a man's supposed to do in terms of taking care of his family, in terms of aside from this one accident right here, you never. Because I've met some men in life.
We're gonna go back to that story.
Right, I've met some men in life where I'm looking at it at this age, just so because I've had a birthday, this good old age of 52. I've met some men in life, and I'm just like, yeah. And so what I will say is this: since our divorce, which has been almost 15 years now,
right,
I have not been in a serious relationship. And one of the reasons why I will not be in a serious relationship is because you set a certain standard. And I say that because, and when I say why, let me rephrase that, why I haven't been in one. You set a certain standard when it came to me as a woman and what I deserve, what I need, and what I need to have, and what my husband's supposed to do for me in terms of certain, just certain things, right? That if I can't have that, I'm not going to have it at all. I'm not going backwards, right? There's just certain things that I'm not going to go backwards on. And when it came to your one thing I appreciate about you was the fact that you were like the yin to my yang, right? Meaning that you were a lot more milder than I was, and I knew that I can go to 10 real quick. And I like the fact that you could balance that, right? And so, when we were younger, we had to go through all those things to appreciate it. And so that's why now for me, there's just certain things that I look for in a man, and a lot of it stems from the way that you were in terms of qualities, because I know you've seen your grandfather and or whoever, just certain things that I knew you took, and you said that you just weren't going to do, or you wasn't going to bring into a relationship, and I appreciate that.
What was one of the main things that I took and I said I would not bring into a relationship?
Putting your hands on a woman.
And I stuck by that. Now you talk about this little incident right there, and And this is my story, so I don't want you to interrupt. I'm not going to interrupt you. Don't interrupt. Mm-mm. So we had this big situation. I think this was in 2008, 2007, 8. I just started the business up and stuff. And I was doing my research. I was inspecting Gadget and all this stuff, and I'm doing all this stuff. So when I brought all the evidence to you, you haul off and slap me, talking about don't ask. Yes, you did.
Stop telling that story, Jerry.
This is the truth.
I did not hit you.
Yes, you did.
Jerry, are you for real right now?
I tell that to my son, and
That's because you have lied about it so much that you started to believe it. Don't do that. Don't do that. You came in the house and you told me that's when you put that bug or whatever it was on my computer, and you found out whatever you did to my computer. I don't know what it was. I don't care what it was. Whatever you did, where you were able to get text messages. This is my story, and you don't cut me off. Okay, you tell your story the way you tell it, but don't you tell them that I hit you first that time, because I didn't.
She hauled off and slapped me and said, "Don't you ever ask me that again." I said, "What the hell is this? Wait a minute, you in the wrong this time, and I gotta get slapped?" I said, "Hell no." That was the only time I put my hands on you.
Boy, stop lying. You know doggone where
I was getting ready to walk out. You know what? You know what you slapped me for?
I said, don't you ask me. Like, I was like, I bitch, don't you ask me no bitch ass. Your bitch ass don't ask me no.
That's exactly what happened.
That's what I did. Damn. No. You should have been with me, dog. If I treated you like that, you should have been like me. You should have been with me if I treated you like that. You don't deserve that kind of disrespect.
No, what happened was this, right? If you remember, you had took my keys, and I had said to you, I said, I'm finna go kick it with one of my little chicks because I had found all this evidence where you was kicking it. And what really set it off was when I asked Taz. I said, Taz, tell me about y'all trip here, coming here. And I pieced everything together. He was like, yeah, we stopped in, I think it was Oklahoma. And yeah, Mom left me that night, and she was gone. I was like, what? I said, yeah. So, and when I brought the evidence to you, you looked at me like, and I said, well, I'm going to kick it with one of my little friends. And that was really set you off. Then you hauled off and slapped me and said, don't ask me that shit no more. I said, what? And then that's when I said, okay, it's time for WWE. So I slapped you. I said, let me get this blick back. But further, I never would raise my hand to you. It didn't matter what you did because I know what I had seen before. Okay. And I never want to relive that. And that's the only time that I did something like that. And I took it and I said, okay, Let me step back into my character, who I really am. But you was about to hit me in the head with a vase. If your mama didn't grab you.
You are so you just make shit up brutal, as man. You go along. You just make shit up.
You gonna tell me you didn't grab that vase?
You make stuff up so much until you start to believe your own bullshit. That's why I tell you, Al Bundy, you need to stop telling these doggone stories because you start to believe them.
Tell me what happened.
Okay, what happened that day? That particular, we were in California. Okay,
just to make sure.
And what ended up happening was somehow, okay, I don't know how. In my mind, you put a tag on my computer, but you say you didn't, but whatever, okay? I emailed a certain somebody. I created a whole new email account because I knew you was reading my email. And so, because you was telling me before, so I said, well, maybe he got access to my email because you're telling me what I'm doing when I'm communicating with this person. So I decided to make a whole new email account and communicate with that person that way. Well, you ended up finding out about that as well on the same laptop, but yet you say you didn't have nothing on my laptop, okay?
Nothing.
But anyway,
so 2007.
Okay, listen. I'm just telling you the story from what. So you come in the house and you telling me you was like you gonna lie to me and tell me you ain't emailed this dude. You ain't say that. You ain't say dude. You used the other word. And I was like, okay, like, oh, so you spying on me? And the way you said it was like one of those things where. I guess you were like, I done told you. And in that moment, all I could think about, and I think I said this, I don't know if I said this to you then or another time, but what I said to you, or what I remember thinking to myself was, why should you be the only one having fun? I remember thinking that to myself. And so, anyway, you hauled off and smacked me. And so when you smacked me,
so how did I smack you? Was
and you had a ring on your finger, and it was a dad ring that your daughters had bought for you. You had a dad ring on your hand, and it was on your right hand. And when you smacked me, the ring cut my eye up under here. And for a moment, right? Because you know, I mean, it was part of my trauma, I guess. I felt like, well, maybe I deserved that one because he did tell me not to talk to this dude no more. But I thought that for like a half a second.
It wasn't even a half a second.
Right. You know what I'm saying? Because after that, it was on and popping. You know what I'm saying? And so,
but
yeah.
No, you slapped me first. That's the whole moral of the story. You slapped me first.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. You surely did. That's it.